And we begin this Sunday morning with America's soft economic war with China and President Trump's efforts to de-escalate this weekend. The president now allowing exemptions to his reciprocal tariffs on smartphones, laptop computers, and the machines that make semiconductor chips, all electronics largely produced outside of America. The new temporary policy narrows the scope of items that fall under President Trump's 145% tariff on China and Chinese imports, which this week sparked retaliation from Communist China, which hit back with its own 125% tariff on U.S. goods. More on the escalating trade war with China and its impact on the economy from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon shortly. But first, as President Trump was battling Communist China over the cost of trade in Washington, he was also deploying Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to battle the communist nation's dominance at one of America's key shipping lanes at the Panama Canal. On Wednesday, the U.S. and Panama agreed to a deal that reaffirms Panama's sovereignty and outlines new military cooperation. The president sending troops to the Panama Canal to defend American interests after years of China exerting influence over the vital waterway, in which over 40% of U.S. container traffic passes through that canal on a yearly basis. A $23 billion deal between American investment firm BlackRock and Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison for 43 ports, including 2 ports at the Panama Canal.
Hydra, you got some Pennsylvania news? So the governor's mansion gets set on fire. One, the first night of Passover, and the governor's Jewish. But surely it's coincidental and not at all some crazy Hamas supporter. Arsonist sets fire. Wow. That's horrible.
Is now on hold after the Chinese Communist Party and
these leftists are psycho, Hydra. That's terrible. Sorry that happened to your Democrat government. Guarantee it was a Hamas supporter.
It is investigating the deal in an effort to stop it. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, just back from the Panama Canal, joins me right now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive. Secretary, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
Tell us about the trip and what are the most important takeaways that we need to understand about the Panama Canal.
Well, President Trump said in his State of the Union address, China has too much influence over the Panama Canal and America's going to take it back. And that's exactly what I was charged to do, what we're continuing to do. China's influence cannot control our own backyard, especially a critical waterway, key terrain like the Panama Canal. You mentioned 40% of ships are U.S. ships. 75% are going to or from a port. So we were able to secure 2 historic agreements. One with the Panama Canal Authority, that our ships, our military vessels and auxiliary vessels will travel first and free through that Panama Canal. And then we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Defense Secretary over there and the President that established a robust and growing U.S. presence, right? You need to secure that key terrain. So Fort Sherman will reopen jointly with the Panamanians, a jungle school, and we're going to have a larger U.S. presence at the invitation of Panama, working with them to keep the Communist Chinese out. If we can't use that waterway in a key contingency, then China has an advantage. Other presidents have allowed us, we've been sort of asleep at the wheel. President Trump has said we need to be serious about our own backyard. That includes a place like the Panama Canal. And I want to thank President Molino, a pro-Trump, pro-America president of Panama, who's sticking his neck out against communists whose influence was real there, Maria. We could see it. You could feel it. The Communist Chinese want to control politicians. They're building infrastructure projects. They want to surveil. They want to take that canal. President Trump says, not on our watch, and we're fighting back.
That's unbelievable. When I
Hey, I saw a video yesterday with the Trump supporter in Boston. Okay. Fighter Killer, what's up, Fighter Killer?
Fucking hat on.
Actually,
get the fuck out of here.
It's actually a public street.
Get the fuck out of here. I don't care, you fucking Nazi.
This is a public street.
Get the fuck off my campus.
What's
I'm
your
gonna
name?
walk you all the way to this fucking corner, you punk. You fucking understand
Go
me?
ahead. Who are you?
You fucking understand me? It doesn't fucking matter.
It
You
does.
fucking Nazi punk. Get this fucking camera on my fucking face.
Or what? Or
Get
what?
this fucking camera on my face.
Or what?
Take your fucking fascist
Would your
hat off.
union like that? Would your union like that?
Hey, you see this?
I know every
see
union guy in this town.
Get the fuck out of here. You think
I know.
Trump fucking supports unions, you fucking
I know
cocksucker?
every
What, are you
union
gonna put this
leader.
on your fucking Snapchat? What are you, 35, you fucking cocksucker?
I'm
Take
35.
that fucking hat off. You understand me?
Uh-huh.
Take it off. Take it
Okay.
off, you Nazi fucking bootlicker.
Oh,
Nazi fucking bootlicker.
Oh,
Don't be on
okay.
my fucking campus with that
Okay.
Nazi fucking hat on. Do you fucking understand me, you cocksucker? Look at gay fucking around fucking.
Caught
get the
all of them.
Absurd, man. Ridiculous.
I spoke with President Trump in an interview last month. He said that all the signage around the canal was all in Chinese. When you're going into it, it's all Chinese signs. When you're coming out of it, there's all Chinese signs. That was sort of one piece of
That's terrible, Pro-Law. That is absolutely terrible. Numb, welcome. Crazy Noodles, welcome.
color that indicates how dominant they've been.
Correct. They're building a tunnel underneath the canal they're paying for. What could that be used for? Surveillance of submarines, of ships, bridges over the top, cranes within. We flew by their cranes in that port, antennas all over them. What are those used to do? We didn't see, by now, they're removing a lot of that signage, but removing signage is not enough. You've got to remove the insidious influence. And in getting these agreements signed, it was a...
Here's what I really think, Pro-Law. Here's what I really think, Pro-Law, when I see that video. Here's what I really think, Pro-Law. Man, I am so thankful. I am so thankful I don't live in Massachusetts. I'm so grateful. I give thanks to God. I give thanks to Jesus Christ that I live in Montana. Genuinely, that's what I think when I see that.
Big effort across our DOD with their leaders. But they know that by coming closer to the United States and allowing additional joint U.S. presence, that's pushing out nefarious, malicious Chinese influence. The Chinese didn't like what happened in Panama this week. Not at all.
A cake is what
because this is a return of U.S. leadership, peace through strength, and the course was charted by President Trump.
Wow, no.
Do you expect this deal between BlackRock and CK Hutchison to go forward? China doesn't want it to go forward. I mean, President Trump said he'd rather deal with BlackRock, an American company, than a Hong Kong-based company.
Well, I agree with the president. And in sitting down with President Molino of Panama,
Wow,
they had just
no.
received the audit, which showed that Hutchinson, the Chinese firm, had hundreds of millions of dollars that they owed. They were going to reveal they had not paid. So this was not a good deal for Panama, whereas the BlackRock deal is more straightforward and an American company. So the Panama would like it. President Trump has said we need it.
Right,
Combine
crazy,
that with
right.
taking out the Belt and Road Initiative, which Secretary of State Rubio got on his first trip in February. And we're getting to the point where, you know, Panama and the U.S. are shoulder to shoulder saying, get out, China, and that serves us.
Unbelievable. We're going to keep talking about this as it relates to trade coming up. Let me get your take on Iran, Secretary, because, of course, we've had direct talks yesterday. They began in the past. It's been indirect talks with a mediator. But there's Steve Witkoff meeting with the foreign minister of Iran. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that President Trump is dead serious on this issue. He's dead serious that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He's said that for 20 years. He's been consistent. That is clear. He's dead serious that he wants it done at the negotiating table. He wants it done peacefully.
Good.
And that's why he's going straight to these talks. He set that deadline. These were productive talks yesterday. I don't want to get ahead of our skis. Steve Witkoff does a fantastic job, but it was a good step, and they're gonna go at it again on Saturday. But he's also dead serious that if we can't figure this out at the negotiating table, then there are other options, to include my department, to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb. We hope we never get there. We really do, Maria. But what we're doing with the Houthis and what we're doing in the region, we've shown a capability to go far, to go deep, and to go big. And again, we don't want to do that. But if we have to, we will, to prevent the nuclear bomb in Iran's hands.
I was reading about some of the armament used against the Houthis and these proxies of Iran, and it suggested to me that we were sending a message to ensure that the Houthis and the Iranians understood the kind of capability we have in our military.
Yeah, like truly believes it, Num. Yeah, no, I know plenty of Democrats, Num, that are, they're conspiracy theorists. They're left-wing conspiracy theorists. The left-wing conspiracy theorists are out of control. Like, a lot of my Democrat friends are hardcore left-wing conspiracy theorists. The craziest conspiracy theorists I know are all left-wing conspiracy theorists. Things like Trump is a Russian asset, etc. The conspiracy theories are getting out of hand on the left, and many people believe them. There's lots of left-wing conspiracy theories.
Should we need to use them?
Well, we know, Maria, that Iran's taking a look at what's happening to the Houthis and realizing they don't
Heck
want
yeah.
any part of
Heck
it.
yeah, Kaikas. Heck yeah.
And that's because we're dismantling the Houthis' capabilities.
Right.
We're even
Right.
hearing rumblings of them second-guessing
Right,
what
Hydra.
they're doing.
Right, Hydra.
Ultimately,
Yep.
we just want to open up our shipping lanes. That's it. It's a very narrow interest with the Houthis, but it sends a clear signal to Iran as well. You're not going to mess with the United States. Iran, come to the table, negotiate full dismantlement of your nuclear capabilities, and then that doesn't have to be your future.
And the president last week with Benjamin Netanyahu unveiled plans for $1 trillion defense budget next year. Massive increase that the president said will provide the country with unmatched military strength. What can you tell us about that, Secretary? Because we've been seeing lots of worries about the Navy, the number of ships in the United States versus what China has. Are you reversing that at this point?
We are rebuilding America's military, which President Trump has charged me with doing. We're going to find efficiencies. You know, we just cut $5.1 billion yet on Friday of useless contracts at DOD. So we're cutting where we need to find where we can, and there's tens of billions more to find.
Yeah.
But we're adding on top of it a generational investment, Maria. President Trump investing in the F-47, sixth-generation fighter, more ships, shipbuilding, long-range missiles, all the types of future of armaments we're going to need for future conflicts. This is a generational rebuilding because the communist Chinese, are ascendant. They're investing in their military. We're going to achieve peace through strength, and President Trump's going to fund it.
And at the same time, the Democrats are mocking the efforts and mocking you. Hakeem Jeffries released a statement on Thread saying the so-called defense secretary has ordered 400 books removed from the Naval Academy. He came up with a new description of DEI. I'm sure you saw that. Dumb, effing individuals? DEI?
Oh, boy. That's how far they've fallen. It's astonishing, not surprising. Of course, they don't like the fact that we're ripping DEI out of the military and making it colorblind and merit-based.
Dumb.
If their
How
whole
stupid.
strategy is, I don't even know how long the video was, didn't see it, minute-long videos on TikTok to call us names while we secure the southern border, kick out Chinese influence, revive the warrior culture inside our military. That's why they lost in a historic fashion to President Trump last time, and their future looks bleak as well. So we're looking at all the ways in which our military academies educate and giving guidance to get rid of DEI, and I think the American people appreciate that.
Secretary, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Maria.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, thank you. And as the secretary was making moves in Panama this week, President Trump was setting the tone on trade with adversaries and allies alike in Washington. The president instituting a 90-day pause in tariffs to give countries the time to adjust to the new costs, as well as announcing a lowered 10% base on tariffs with countries that did not escalate or retaliate against his initial tariffs. The pivot coming partly after President Trump caught my interview Wednesday with J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, and after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent joined me to explain the national security threats and the realities from China. Now, new negotiations are underway with trade partners during this 90-day pause. Here's Treasury Secretary Bessent, followed by J.P. Morgan CEO Dimon, with me on Wednesday.
It's going to be, a bespoke, tailored process for each country. And, as we strike these trade deals, I think that we will see greater and greater certainty. We have...
Hold on. Some of the guys in my guard unit went to the reserve unit on our base to work the then new C-17s to experience something new rather than the KC-135s, which our grandfathers could have worked on. Fun fact, I recognize two of the tail numbers on the KC-135s that the Tennessee National Guard launched to the Middle East. Dude, that's awesome. Okay, Kiss, that's very cool, man. Trump's efforts against the Iran and Houthis hurts Russia, too. Oh, hell yeah, Num. Hurts Iran, hurts Russia, absolutely.
A delegation...
Random Gaming, what's up, Random? Hell yeah.
...from Vietnam, and I was at the ambassador's residence, the Japanese ambassador's residence here in D.C. for the Cherry Blossom Festival last night, which was fantastic. And a Japanese delegation will be coming soon, South Korea, India, the UK. So I think we are going to see a rapid succession of these deals that will give CEOs greater certainty. But I think nothing gives greater certainty than getting this tax bill done. I think it's unfortunate that the Chinese actually don't want to come and negotiate because they are the worst offenders in the international trading system. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world. And I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country, that their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what? No one wins in a war, but it's proportionality, and the proportionality for the Chinese is going to be much worse. And the other thing too is, Maria, what would be a very good step with the Chinese would be acknowledging.
Wait, what's all the C-17 traffic to the Middle East? I haven't been hearing about that. Is the U.S. military like just sending a bunch of planes to the Middle East all of a sudden, and not really reporting on it or publicly saying why?
That the precursor chemicals for
Yes.
fentanyl come from
I haven't
China.
seen that.
They make their way into North America and then are sold into the U.S. We have more than 100,000 American citizens dying every year.
So what do you think about the tariff plan?
I think it is perfectly reasonable for someone to say that trade was unfair. There were unfair trade things. And remember, it's not just tariffs. It's tariffs. I think they have the VAT wrong, how they understand it. And I think they should really get a better understanding to make it easy to negotiate. But there are all these non-tariff barriers around food and energy, and then subsidies, which China is famous for. So it's totally reasonable to say we want to make trade better. China and Russia have made it clear they want to kind of dismantle the post-World War II system. And I think the goal of all this trade stuff should be to make Europe and our trading partners, Japan, Korea, Philippines, stronger, not weaker, bring them closer as we build up our military. And any trade that protects military, that we should definitely do. But the point about national security is economic security, national security are almost directly related in the long run. We can't rely on any potential adversary for things we need for our military. And so, there I'm quite sympathetic. That we should do. That's absolutely paramount.
Do you personally expect a recession?
What's China buying from the U.S.? Mostly airplanes, mostly commercial jetliners from Boeing.
I'm going to defer to my economist at this point, but I think probably that's a likely outcome.
Well, how significant a slowdown? I mean, are you seeing defaults?
Not yet, but I expect them. And the other thing, which we haven't had any slowdown or real recession, and COVID was so short, I almost don't include it, and so long that if you have rates going up a little bit, and inflation is sticky, and credit spreads are gapping out, which they're going to, I think you'll see more credit problems than people have seen in a long time.
My thanks to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and J.P. Morgan Chairman and CEO Jamie Dimon. Coming up, more on the breaking news on tariffs, exemptions, and the road ahead for President Trump's agenda with White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller coming next. Stay with us.
I love Stephen Miller.
Customs and Border Patrol released
Miller.
detailed guidelines on the U.S.'s new tariff exemptions for certain products important to America, including semiconductors, electronic devices, AI servers, computers, smartphones. The president allowing tariff exemptions to the 145% levy on China. But the items are still subject to the initial
Fake news is going great, Panzer.
20% tariff related to the president's use of the
We always start out with the real one, though. Maria Bartiromo, the only real Sunday show.
National Emergency Economic Powers Act, that's IEEPA. That's federal law that grants the president broad authority to regulate international commerce related to national security and emergencies. Joining me now with more in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff on Policy, Stephen Miller. Stephen, it's great to see you this weekend. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And I called it breaking news because Border Patrol released this on Friday night. But I guess it's not such breaking news from your standpoint because you were targeting specific items from day one. Walk us through these exemptions, Stephen, and what they mean.
Yes, this is just another great example of how President Trump had a detailed plan from the beginning that's being executed exactly as directed. And unfortunately, some in the media are deliberately misportraying that plan. The original 20% IEPA, that's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, for China poisoning our citizens with fentanyl, that 20% rate is and continues to be applied to all imports from China. When the president issued his reciprocal tariffs, our government at the time specifically said that chips and semiconductors, which are critical components of our national security, were going to be dealt with through a separate commerce authority known as a 232. That was always the plan because those components are so essential to our national security. We need to have a separate process for dealing with how to reshore those essential industries. When the tariff rate went up to the full rate of 125 on top of the 20, it was necessary to publish a more detailed list from Customs and Border Protection explaining the rates and how they're applied. There are no exemptions. Everyone pays at least the 20%, and these particular components are being put through a separate process controlled by the Department of Commerce, which is the 232. So this is a sophisticated, elegant, detailed plan.
I love how. So basically, when this all came out Friday, everybody was like, yes, great news. The markets are going to rip on Monday. The markets are going to bounce on Monday. This is great news. Trump is getting rid of the tariffs on a huge chunk. Awesome. And then on Sunday, the Trump administration sends out all these officials. No, no, no. We're still hitting everything. These are even harder, going to even get hit even harder with tariffs. It's like, I guarantee the futures and the market's going to dump again now.
To deal with Chinese economic aggression against the United States.
Yeah, and look, I still expect, semiconductor companies, Apple, these companies that are exposed to this to trade higher in the stock market on Monday. I still, even though this was the plan from day one, but obviously markets are reacting to all of this. Stephen, what can you tell us about this 90-day period where President Trump is negotiating with our allies and on trade? Should we expect deals with countries like Japan and South Korea and India soon?
Well, as President Trump has said, he's dispatched his team, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Jameson Greer, to have conversations with these countries and to explain to them their egregious trade abuses, how they've manipulated their currencies, how they have illegally subsidized their industries, and how they balloon the trade deficit. And that's going to lead to a bilateral process with each and every one of these countries. And I'm not going to prejudge that result. But the 90-day pause before the tariff rates snap back gives us an opportunity to have that conversation with each of these countries and to deal with these long-running, severe, and systemic abuses, while at the same time, and very importantly, focusing all of our attention and the attention of the entire international community on how China has distorted the entire global trading system.
True.
Through decades of intellectual property theft, trademark theft, copyright theft, industrial espionage, currency manipulation, illegal subsidization of critical industries, targeted dumping to destroy core manufacturing capacity in other countries so that they cannot protect and defend themselves in a time of national emergency. These are state-led policies from China that require redress. And the only scandal is that it took so long for us to finally have a president in Donald Trump who will protect and defend America from these abuses, while every other president, Democrat and Republican, allowed China to plunder us to a degree that was so savage and so total, it honestly eclipses the imagination.
It really does. And why? I mean, I cover this every single day and put a spotlight on the bad behavior, and that's being nice about it, of communist China. Why is it that we allow them to roll over America and undermine this great country every day?
And they've done it for decades. It is shameful that core elements of our industrial base, our medical base, our manufacturing base, our pharmaceutical base, our defense base, our electronic components, our chips, our critical minerals, that all of the things that power a country, we've allowed those supply chains to be centered in China, to give China the ability to exert that kind of control over the rest of the world through these illicit means? That's unthinkable. President Trump, history will record that the actions President Trump has taken in recent days were the beginning of saving the West from complete economic domination by another power.
But look, Stephen, during
Amen.
COVID, we learned that they may not send these critical elements to America. During COVID, you remember when the propaganda, the state media sent out a tweet saying, well, maybe we won't send the critical components, underlying components of prescription drugs to America right now. Let them get sick. Then suddenly that tweet was gone and you won't be able to find it anymore. But why wouldn't China make the decision not to send any of that, the critical rare earth minerals right now?
Well, the United States also has considerable and profound economic leverage over China. First and most importantly, we underwrite the entire country. All of its development, all of its industrialization, all of its economic subsidies, all of those. When you see those photos of what cities in China looked like 10, 20 years ago, barren, desolate, and now these glittering skyscrapers, who do you think's paid for all of that? We did. We paid for literally all of it. So China, and we have other leverage in terms of, I don't want to get into it here, but there are many things that are essential to China's security that they need from the United States. So China would be very wise to pursue the path of de-escalation.
Do you believe China was selling treasuries this week?
I don't want to comment on that. All I want to say is that America is in the best position under President.
I love how none of them will comment on on whether China was selling treasuries. So it's like, yet again, all of this stuff that's being said in public, like all of this stuff that's being said in public about the tariffs and blah, blah, it's like, whatever, dude. We all know that behind the scenes, something is going on with the treasury markets, and that's what you won't talk about.
President Trump to dominate the economic future because of how we are unleashing deregulation, exploring and opening American energy, including trillions of dollars in clean coal, and how we are on the verge of passing a tax bill that will provide economic certainty and make America
1927 ethos. What up, 1927 ethos? Wow, that's crazy that you got pushback, 1927 ethos. Like, there should be no question if you were trading within your 401k. I trade all the time within my 401k, rebalance my investments. Like, yeah, that's your money. You have a right to do that. I can't believe that you would get pushback or even banned from funds. That sounds illegal to me. Totally illegal, in fact.
The most desirable place on planet Earth. To shore jobs, invest, expand, hire, and grow. This is an economic strategy. Deal with China's abuses, deregulate, explode American energy production, create the most favorable tax system for American development on the face of the earth. That is the recipe for radical American success, Maria.
Stephen, it sounds fantastic, and thank you for your leadership on the border as well and stopping all of that fentanyl from coming in. Great to have you this morning. White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Quick break, and then the 119th Congress celebrates the first 100 days with a victory. House Speaker Mike Johnson is here. It's 100 days in office for the 119th Congress, during which time the Republican majority passed several bills, including the Laken Riley Act, which the president signed into law, along with the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, Protecting American Energy Act, to prevent a ban on fracking, the Halt Fentanyl Act, and the Violence Against Women in by Illegal Aliens Act, among others. But the biggest victory hit this week when the House passed the Senate's budget blueprint to advance President Trump's agenda, which includes tax cuts, spending cuts, money for border security, defense, and energy, and puts lawmakers on a path to move forward with President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And joining me right now is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Maria, great to be with you as always.
And congratulations to you on this, the 100th day in office for the 119th Congress. You have gotten so much done in this first 100 days. We are thrilled that you're with us on this day, day 100. Mr. Speaker, walk us through the passing of that budget on Friday before you all left for the Easter recess. Where does that put you now? What is the work to happen once you come back?
Well, thanks so much. It was a big milestone. We've had a number of those. As you noted, this is our 100th day of the 119th Congress, and we've been very busy delivering on the promises we made to the American people to help President Trump make America stronger and safer and more prosperous again. And passing that budget resolution was a big milestone. It really was, Maria, because what that does is it allows us to move one step closer to the one big, beautiful bill that the president and all of us keep talking about. In this bill, we're going to cement so many of the promises we made on the campaign trail and check so many of the boxes of the America First agenda. I mean, it will be everything, as you know, from securing the border and making sure we have the resources necessary to do that in permanent fashion. We're going to revive the economy again by bringing about American energy dominance once more. Of course, we'll have lots of regulatory reform and the cutting of the red tape, and not the least of which, the big priority is to ensure the American people don't experience the biggest tax increase in their lives at the end of this year, which is what would happen by default if we didn't accomplish this mission.
Now, 2 Republicans voted against the legislation, and they voted with Democrats because they felt that there weren't enough spending cuts in this legislation.
Yeah, there's been a lot of deliberate negotiation, a lot of hard work done for more than a year, Maria, to get to this point. We started this process in March of last year. We expected and believed that we would have unified government. We would come to this moment of really incredible opportunity, and that is that we would have alignment. We would win the White House, the Senate, and the House, and we would be able to engage in this process. The beauty of the reconciliation process is because it's the one mechanism that allows you to get around the necessity of 60 votes in the Senate, and that's what's so important because we only have 53 Republicans there. But we have to get the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans, virtually every single one of them, aligned to make sure that while we extend the tax cuts, to your point, we also pay for them, because we all know that the national debt is probably the greatest single threat to our national security right now.
So knowing that 76% of the spending goes toward mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, where are the offsets?
Well, here's the key to all of it. The president has made absolutely clear many times, as we have as well, that we're going to protect Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid for people who are legally beneficiaries of those programs. There are a lot of Americans who rely upon those programs, and we've got to ensure that they're safeguarded. That's a big priority of the White House and the Republicans in Congress. At the same time, we have to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. We have to eliminate people on, for example, on Medicaid who are not actually eligible to be there. Able-bodied workers, for example, young men who should never be on the program at all. When you have people on the program that are draining the resources, it takes it away from the people that are actually needing it the most and are intended to receive it. You're talking about young single mothers, down on their fortunes at a moment. The people with real disabilities, the elderly, and we've got to protect and preserve that program. So we're going to preserve the integrity of it in this process. We have lots of categories of areas where the government is too large, it does too many things, and the DOGE efforts and others have highlighted that for the American people. So in this process, you're going to see in 11 different committees of jurisdiction across the House, members working hand in hand with their sleeves rolled up, working to carve out those inefficiencies.
Yo, Big Sky Angler, what's up, man? Good to see you.
We're going to make government work better for the people in this legislation, in addition to checking all those boxes I mentioned earlier, and that Congress has dealt with in many decades, and arguably one of the most in all of its history.
So when you come back, the committees will get to work in terms of a surgical way to identify what to cut so that you can actually get that bill to the president's desk. Are you still counting on getting that bill by the end of May?
Yeah, the timing's critical, Maria, because for all the reasons you know and you've discussed on your show all the time and that we know, we have to show that stability to the markets. We have to send a message to the bond market, the stock market, investors, to our allies around the world and our enemies as well, that America is on sound fiscal ground. And so we can bend the debt trajectory curve, get us back on a path to fiscal sanity and do all this. But the timing is important. The reason I put Memorial Memorial Day as our deadline is because the sooner we get it done, the better. It will really calm, I think, a lot of the things in the economy and start us back on that path to real recovery. That's why it's so important, and I think getting it done by the end of May is important as well because the debt limit cliff is approaching. Now, some projected it could happen in August or September, but depending upon tax receipts in this tax cycle, it could be pushed back on us further, maybe to early June. So we really have no margin for error.
Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the movements within the Congress is to, I guess, raise taxes on the rich in order to pay for these tax extensions for the lower earners, like the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. The idea that you can have a new tax bracket of 40% for the highest earners. Are you seriously considering that?
Well, I'm not a big fan of doing that. I mean, we're the Republican Party, and we're for tax reduction for everyone. So, I mean, that's a general principle that we always try to abide by. There's lots of discussion, lots of ideas on the Hill. People have different thoughts and theories on how we can solve this perfect equation to get all of this done. But I wouldn't put any money on any of that yet. I guess everybody, I would say.
I would put money on the Republicans raising taxes on the rich. I 100% would. 100%.
White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, good to see you again. So,
Hey, Jake, good
the White House says everything that happened over the last week and a half went according to plan. Over the course of just a few days, the global market lost trillions in stock value, regained some of it, but not all of it. The strength of the dollar right now is plunging. Consumer sentiment is worse than at any time during the Great Recession. Is all of this part of the plan?
Right. In fact, let's talk about what the trade plan is, because I think that it's very, very important for people to understand, why we're doing what we're doing and how we got to the point where this is the right strategy. The bottom line is that in the United
What a completely biased bullshit question. Is it part of the plan? Are you planning to destroy the economy? My name's Jake Tapper on CNN. Is your plan to destroy everything? God, what a jerk.
United States, there are these things called 232s. You've heard people talk about it. It's a trade action where the government decides that there's something that's a serious threat to national security if we don't do something about it. And so an example, just hypothetical, would be suppose that in order to protect ourselves from an adversary, we had cannons, but we had to buy the cannonballs from them. Well, then you could put a 232 tariff on the cannonball, and then we'd have to make it here, and then that would make it so that if we ever did have a situation where we were in conflict, that we'd had everything we need to protect ourselves. And so the 232 things were always excluded. They weren't covered by the new actions that you discussed at the opening. And so it's not like, so for example, semiconductors are the key important part of a lot of defense equipment. And there's going to be a semiconductor 232 that studies those things carefully and decides what has to be onshored in order to protect America. And so it was always the case in Annex 2 in the Reciprocal Act that semiconductors were going to not be covered by that action because there's a 232 action that was announced in the executive order that is going to address it. And so I don't think that anything really should be a surprise if people stopped and studied, but it seems like a lot of the coverage, people are in a rush to get the coverage out and didn't really think through the logic of it, which is why we have a longer form show with you here, right, Jake, where we can talk about what exactly is going on. And then finally, why is it that people think that there is an emergency about this? Well, it's because, especially over the last 4 years,
Jake Tapper looks so
the
sad.
influence of China into every little corner of our country has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it actually is the case that it's a very uncomfortable
God,
amount
I can't
of
stand
Chinese
Jake Tapper.
input
This guy is such
in
a
our actual
dirtball.
weapons systems, Jake. In our actual weapons systems. And so President Trump thinks it's urgent that we address these matters.
Okay, let's talk about the overall investment environment. 9 days ago, President Trump announced to the whole world that those were the rules for doing business in America going forward. The tariffs were here to stay. His policies were not going to change. I'm just quoting him from his Truth Social messages. And then, of course, on Wednesday, he issued this 90-day pause on most of the tariffs. And in his own words, it was because the bond markets were getting queasy and yippy. So here's what one small business owner told CNN about the impact that this whiplash is having on her.
A pause is better than no pause, but the uncertainty is still really chaotic for a small business like me. And now, even if I move out of China, how am I going to be certain that if I place an order today, I won't find a new tariff tomorrow. This up and down is just something as a small business I can't pivot to.
So that's Sarah Wells from Sarah Wells Bags. Well, what do you say to small business owners or even big business owners who say they're having difficulty making long-term business decisions because the country seems right now to be run by capricious whim?
Oh, I don't think at all it's run by capricious whim. The way that I would think about it is that in the previous administration, you could sort of say, if you're thinking about it in a football analogy, is that they were running out the clock. And that what's going on now in the Trump administration is across a wide array of policy areas, we're in a 2-minute offense. And the 2-minute offense is pushing, as you've seen, the reconciliation bill through so that we get tax relief for American people, deregulation, and of course, trade policy. Now, on the trade policy, the whole point of the trade policy is to address the national emergency that we're too dependent on foreign products in the U.S., especially if we were at a time of conflict, and we're doing something about that. And the reciprocal act was basically, guys, if you come to the table and negotiate with us and treat us the same way we treat you, then we'll get your rate really low. And so right now, 130 countries have responded, and we're negotiating with them, and they've got their rate down to 10%. And so really, it's kind of almost a two-world system. There's a process about China, and that's very, very nascent, if at all, and then the process for everybody else. So the process for everybody else is orderly, it's clear, people are coming to town with great offers. We've got Japan, Korea, India. I was just talking to the foreign minister of India, and everything is moving forward very quickly. And so I guess the bottom line is that the small business owner has experienced over the last few weeks the start of a process that's settling down really quite quickly. Again, 130 countries are at 10% now.
So let's talk about these 130 countries, because as you know better than I do, it typically takes months, if not years, to negotiate trade deals. Trump's signature trade deal from his first term, a great achievement, according to both Democrats and Republicans, NAFTA 2, or the USMCA, that took 15 months to put together. How exactly are you and your team and the USTR team, how are you going to negotiate deals that actually deliver for the American people with more than 100 countries in less than 3 months?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I just a little bit of more clarification. One of the things I like to ask people is, who's the chairman of the National Economic Council? And then everybody think, oh, it's you, Kevin. Well, no, I'm the director. The chairman of the National Economic Council is President Trump. And so what President Trump does is he sets out a path for everybody, for Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, and for Jameson, on how they would move forward on a particular policy matter. And then it's my job as director to make sure that the president's wishes are being fulfilled. I'm kind of there to help everybody succeed. And I can tell you, I've been watching the people who are assigned to different assignments working really, really hard on getting trade deals forward over the last many weeks. And so one of the things that we were thinking about this week was that we had a few of these deals that are so close to baked that we could announce that we have a deal in principle. You're right that getting the fine print out would maybe take a little longer, but we were thinking about announcing a deal in principle even this week, but then we were making so much progress so rapidly that the president decided to instead of having one or two things right now, just go for the 10% pause. And I think it was the right answer given the massive amount of momentum that we've been seeing.
Yeah, so let's talk about Lutnick and Jameson Greer, because last Sunday, the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, was on a different show. He was talking about tariffs, and he was saying that what these are going to do is it's going to bring iPhone manufacturing to the United States. 5 days ago, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer told senators, quote, "The president has been clear with me and with others that he does not intend to have exclusions and exemptions," unquote, to these tariffs. But now we know about these carve-outs for electronics imported to the U.S. that you talked about at the top, smartphones, computers, chips. It's a contradictory message. I mean, I understand that you're saying that this was the plan, but Lutnick, it seems like nobody told Lutnick and Greer.
No, I disagree with that. I think that absolutely the characterization that I gave you at the top of the hour is the thing that everybody understood all along. But I can see that when you're getting interviewed here, interviewed there, that somehow, like, not having the time like you and I have now to just show the big picture can make it so that people don't have a complete picture of what's going on.
Well, Greer was in Senate
think
testimony.
About it this way. No, but think about it this way again, that there are these 232s which are coming, that are announced in the Reciprocal Trade Act, and the things that are going to be in the 232s, like the cannonballs that we need so that we can have something to put in the cannon, those things are in progress. And while those are in progress, these, say, 10% on most of the world tariffs will not apply to those things. And so then there's a question, an interpretation, what you say, okay, if you're not applying a semiconductor to those things, then what does that exactly mean? Because the U.S. doesn't really...
Yeah, dude, I love the way that these media are operating now with the Trump administration on the tariffs. They're like, so what's the tariff now on the countries? And the Trump administration, 10%. They're like, oh, well, I don't really understand. Isn't it 20%? No, it's 10%. Well, that's confusing. And now you're back in. No, it's always been. It's 20%. You told us it's. I'm still thinking it's 20. No, it's 10%. Well, that's confusing. I'm still thinking it's 20%. That's what the media is doing.
Really import a whole lot of just semiconductors. The semiconductors are in things. And it's very, very natural for the Commerce Department, and I think the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, is one of the best Commerce secretaries I've ever worked with, that he had his team go through and say, well, what does it mean to comply with this order? And that's what came out. I don't think that it was rushed or disorganized at all.
So these exemptions are only for items that will help our Defense Department needs? It's not iPhones in general? It's not semiconductors in general for commercial use?
There's a long list, which you could put a graphic up, of the things that are that we're planning 232 actions on because they're necessary for national security. And those things that are on that long list are things that will be exempt until those 232s happen.
But you understand how some people...
But you can understand how some people are confused. Shut up, Jake!
...might look at this and say, this doesn't really make sense in terms of the president's larger goal. If the President Trump and...
No, it does make sense, Jake. But this doesn't make sense. You can understand how some people might say this doesn't make sense. But you said this. You said tariffs are 10%. But you can still understand, like, this doesn't make sense because I want it to be 20%, and I want to pretend that I think it's 20%, even though you told me it's 10%. You can see how that is confusing, can't you? No, Jake, we can't.
And you and your team are all trying to reshore manufacturing so that American manufacturing for phones and computers is happening here in the United States, and along with all these great middle-class jobs that would go with it, that you're exempting those items while at the same time the reshoring and manufacturing of the production of sneakers and T-shirts would happen here. And that seems to be completely the opposite of the goal, right?
No, Jake,
that's just
no.
a perspective. If you think that we're going to fail to deliver on the 232s, then your question would be one to wonder about. But the 232s will be successful. We've already got 232 steel and aluminum, for example, and so that wouldn't be covered by the...
So your plans are going to fail, right? And since your plans failed, and it doesn't make sense, does it? Dumb question, Jake. Dumb question.
Reciprocal part, and we've got 232 on autos. That's not covered by the reciprocal part. So those other things are going to happen, and it makes a great deal of sense. So the one final thing I want to say is going back to like
seriously, I'm getting deranged at this stuff because it's ticking me off so much.
Why are we doing this in the first place? There's the national security matter, but there's also what it means for the American worker. And so when we look at, say, the small business person who's concerned that the price of their goods is going to be higher when they sell it to their customers, the thing that they also have to remember is that these policies, which the president successfully enacted in the first term, are going to increase the demand for labor, increase wages, up by almost $6,500 in the first 3 years of the Trump administration. And so what it means is that even if you accept the naysayers' perspective on what might happen to the price of a cup of coffee, that the person walking into the coffee shop is going to have a lot more money. In the 15 years after China entered the WTO, real wages went down. So wages went down by more than prices, as we thought these cheap goods were going to revolutionize America. In fact, it was the opposite. Welfare went down. We had Angus Deaton write a whole book about the deaths of despair that were related to this. And so I think we're very optimistic about the fact that people are going to have more money in their pockets and that they're going to have a higher standard of living.
Well, right now, I mean, wealth has disappeared from the market, and as you know, the fears of a global recession.
Well, as right now, stocks are down. So what do you think about that? Stocks are down. Stocks are down. Shut up, Jake.
Yo, thank you, anonymous gifter. I can't deal with Jake Tapper. That guy's such a scumbag. Measles outbreak. Face the Nation is trying to scare people about. That are scared about the measles outbreak, guys. We better have masks on. We better put our masks on.
For more on our latest poll and how Americans are reacting to the Trump economic agenda, we're joined now by our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, President Trump put tariffs at the center of his campaign. Now he's enacting them. Is there support for what he's doing?
Like a lot of the way people look at investments, it depends on what you see as your goals and your time horizon, by which I mean, in the immediate, we see 3/4 of Americans think that tariffs will raise prices, at least in the short term, and a lot think in the long term, too. Now, they're sensitive to that because, as we've discussed for many years, inflation and prices are top concerns, right? The second thing we see is an increase in the number of people who think that Donald Trump's policies now are making them financially worse off. And it's not just that movement, but it's the setup against expectations. Back at the start of his term a few months ago, a lot of people thought that his policies would make them financially better off. So that's a big change. But now let me talk about the time horizon, because this applies to his political base, to Republicans, many of whom say, hold on a second, you can't evaluate this right now. You have to give it 6 months. You have to give it a year to see how his tariff and trade policies are going to play out. So with that, they're much more supportive of tariffs and of his approach. They also think that he is just using this as a negotiating tactic. Most of them think that he's going to ultimately remove those tariffs, maybe when he gets what he wants. And so that's why you still see a lot of Republican support for all of this.
Well, the White House had said it's not up for negotiation, but then the President Trump said there is a negotiation, and that's where there's some of the confusion right now. But you did indicate the approval rating itself is under pressure. Where is that pressure centered?
So more people say that they like his goals with trade and tariff policies than his approach. And that approach part is weighing on his ratings for handling the economy, which are down, his ratings for handling inflation, tied to what I described about prices, which are also down. But look, the market in the public mind is not the economy.
It's not. The stock market isn't.
Right.
But it's a pricing mechanism of the future.
Exactly. And it is an indicator, especially for people who say they have money, not just in the market, but that their finances are sensitive to what happens in the market. They're much less approving of his approach right now. But having said that, consider also jobs. The public is mixed on whether Trump's approach is going to lead to more manufacturing jobs. Republicans think it will, but again, that's kind of a long-term issue. Back to the politics for a second. You know, people often ask, when does a president own the economy? And right now, this looks like Donald Trump's economy. A majority of people say it's his policies that are responsible, either way, good or bad, for how it is, not Joe Biden's. And that, of course, sets things up going forward.
Anthony Salvanto, great insights. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation.
So, such great insights, such great insights. People whose stocks are down aren't happy that their stocks are down. Oh, such great insight.
And stay with us. We go now to California Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, who joins us this morning from another state, Ohio. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning, Margaret.
I want to get to what's happening to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, don't you love that? Now suddenly Democrats care so much about the stock market. Remember when the stock market was doing well under Trump, how much Democrats cared about it? Remember what Democrats said about the stock market when it was doing well under Trump?
in just a moment on the trade and tech front. But first off, I want to ask you, since you sit on the Armed Services Committee, for any insight you might have on one of the announcements made late on Friday. The president authorized the U.S. military to take over a large swath of public land along the southern border, including in the state of California. And I understand that that means the Pentagon's budget can now be used for things like border security or potentially to even detain migrants in that area. Has Congress been briefed on these plans? Do you have any sense of what's happening?
We have not. And Margaret, it's longstanding law that you can't use the military for domestic enforcement. It's a violation of the Constitution. I'm hopeful the Supreme Court would 9-0 rule that way, just like they've ruled that the deportation of Abrego was unconstitutional. But we have not heard any specifics of it, and it's blatantly against the law.
You there were talking about Maryland resident Abrego Garcia, who was detained and then sent to a prison in El Salvador. The Supreme Court said that the Trump administration actually has to facilitate getting him back, but they didn't actually rule on whether he was a gang member or not. I mean, the Justice Department can't substantiate it. But why did you bring up that specific case as proof of something?
Well, it just shows that this administration is taking action.
Way to try to like lob like the softest of softballs of all time.
That are unconstitutional. Look, Vice President Vance said that the Abrego was an M13 gang member with no legal rights here, and the Supreme Court said, well, we don't know, and he does actually have legal rights. And so similarly, you now have an administration that is using the military for domestic enforcement, which is illegal, and I believe that even this Supreme Court, a conservative Supreme Court, would rule it's unconstitutional.
On Garcia, ICE said it was an administrative error that led to this man's arrest in the first place. It seems the Trump administration is saying it's now in the hands of the president of El Salvador, who will be at the White House this week. So we will watch for developments on that space. But going back to the line of questioning here regarding armed services, we understand that the president sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to talk to Iranian officials over this past weekend. We don't know much other than they're going to meet again. But in the meantime, the U.S. military has positioned as many as 6 B-2 bombers in the Indian Ocean. That's the kind of aircraft that would carry a weapon that could be used to take out underground facilities for a nuclear program. Do you believe President Trump would need congressional approval to carry out a strike, even if it was just in support of Israel leading that attack on Iran?
Absolutely, and almost a third of our B-2 bombers are there. Look, it's unconstitutional what they're doing in Yemen. I said it was unconstitutional when Biden made those strikes. They need to come to Congress. And look, the president was elected by the American people saying we don't want our tax dollars going for more bombing in the Middle East, for more wars in the Middle East. I think he's ignoring the base that actually elected him that does not want more of these strikes. In the case of Yemen, the Saudis had war there for almost 10 years, and it didn't do anything to address the situation with the Houthis. The president campaigned on diplomacy. He hasn't done that, and what we're seeing is escalation.
Well, we'll see what the diplomacy he's attempting achieves in the near term. But let me ask you why you're out in Ohio talking to us this morning. I understand in the coming days you're also going to go to Connecticut to Yale Law on Tuesday. Are you trying to sort of troll Vice President Vance? And if so, why?
Well, no. I mean, Cleveland City Club invited me to give a speech on the economy. And let's talk about these tariffs. I mean, they were chaotic and they were totally haphazard. So you had Howard Lutnick on saying that we were going to bring manufacturing back, electronics manufacturing back to the United States. And they realized suddenly that that wasn't going to happen. Actually, the iPhone price would go up to $1,700 or $2,000. And by the way, if that manufacturing moved, it would probably move to Malaysia or Vietnam. So they suddenly reverse, they exempt all of electronics manufacturing, which is about a third of our trade deficit. And I'm here at the Cleveland City Club to say, if you want to have electronics manufacturing here, the way to do it is not blanket tariffs. You have to create an electronic manufacturing hub, the kind we did with the CHIPS Act. That means investing in tool engineering and workforce. It means having investment tax credits. It means having government buy things from the United States. The president has no plan of how to actually
Bad
have
policy. That's
high-end
all
advanced
bad policy.
manufacturing in the United States.
False.
Well, the district you represent includes Silicon Valley, so you must be hearing from some of these CEOs. Who are they lobbying, apparently successfully, to get these carve-outs?
I think they're talking about sound economic policy. I mean, it really would have been, they're talking to anyone they can. At the White House, they're talking to anyone they can who has the president's ear. But what they're saying is pretty simple. First, they're saying that Howard Lutnick, the screws and the screwing only is about 0.1% of an iPhone's cost. I mean, you need to, the actual components are memory, or camera, or RAM. I mean, it's like, I understand they have 19th century policies of McKinley, but they need to have a 21st century understanding of the economy. And then they're saying, okay, you really want to do this? The iPhone will cost $1,600 to $1,700, but we're not going to be able to bring it back to the United States. We'll go to India, we'll go to Malaysia, we'll go to Vietnam. And if you want to bring back the manufacturing to the United States, you have to invest in the workforce, you have to have some investment tax credit for the facilities, and you have to be able to buy the things we make in the United States. So all I'm saying is let's have sound economic policy. And I saw the poll earlier. Yeah. This is not a hypothetical. This is not something the president will be able to spin. Either we're going to see new factories come or we're not. And tariffs just aren't going to do that.
Well, we didn't get a clear answer on when these semiconductor tariffs are coming, but the administration argues they're in the pipeline and that, you know, China's not going to get a free pass when it comes to tech. What is that going to mean for your part of the country?
Well, it's, again, they don't have any
yes, it is, ethos. Yes, it is.
When the tariff will come, when it won't come, and they're against the CHIPS Act. So how are you going to, let's say you suddenly put tariffs on China. What it would mean is the production would move to other parts of Asia. It still isn't going to come here unless you're financing those factories here, willing to buy here. Tariffs can be a tool used as a broader Hamiltonian industrial policy. And that's what I'm hearing Ohio to talk about, which is what is actually going to bring advanced manufacturing to this country.
All right, Congressman Khanna, we'll be watching. We'll be right back. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy claimed last week that the measles outbreak may be plateauing. But the highly contagious virus continues to spread mostly in unvaccinated people. And the CDC reports that the number of cases topped 700 in 2025 so far. The measles virus, which was once effectively eradicated here in America thanks to widespread vaccination, is now in 24 states. We spoke Friday with Dr. Peter Marks, the former head of the Food and Drug Administration's vaccine program, who was forced to resign last month as part of Kennedy's redesign of American health policy. Our conversation began on the subject of the measles outbreak and the response by the Trump administration. Secretary Kennedy spoke to my colleague, Dr. John LaPook, earlier this week following the death of a second unvaccinated child in Texas due to measles. Kennedy reiterated people should get the MMR vaccine. Take a listen.
What's the position philosophically of the federal government in terms of public health?
The federal government's position, my position is people should get the measles vaccine, but the government should not be mandating.
Understand.
You know, but I've always said during my campaign and every part, every public statement I've made, I'm not going to take people's vaccines away from them. Right. What I'm going to do is make sure that we have good science so that people can make an informed choice.
Is that a sufficient endorsement?
As a public health professional, I'm going to tell you what an endorsement of the measles vaccine sounds like right now. If you can hear my voice right now and you have a child that is unvaccinated against measles, we have measles spreading in this country very significantly. You wouldn't put your child in a back seat of a car without being strapped into their car seat. You want to get your child vaccinated against measles so that they don't have a 1 in 1,000 chance.
I'm sorry, dummy, but RFK Jr. saying that we think you should get the measles vaccine is much better than whatever the hell this is, you weirdo. This guy's clearly evil.
Of dying from measles if
Yeah.
they contract it. There's no reason to put your child at that risk because the vaccine does not cause death. It does not cause encephalitis, and it does not cause autism. So that's what an endorsement sounds like. Just make the comparison.
Literally, RFK Jr.'s was more like, I actually understood what RFK Jr. said. I tuned this guy out because he's clearly got a sunken soul.
That has to be extremely frustrating for you as someone who worked in the vaccine space for so long.
This guy's corrupt. If he was high up in the FDA, that means he's corrupt. That means I don't trust him.
Clearly feel that this is safe and effective, and that not saying it clearly is endangering people. Right. Am
So
I understanding?
another way, yes, no,
your
exactly,
frustration?
exactly. But there's a whole host of people who can't speak out like I am that are saying, you know, this is a vaccine for which the benefits so greatly outweigh the risks that to not use it is the equivalent of, again, throwing. I mean, if you saw a child, if you saw a 15-month-old rolling around in the backseat of a car, you'd probably call Child Protective Services.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying we should order parents to do this because I don't.
Yeah, you are. You basically just did say that, you jerk.
I want to get into the whole issue of mandates, but we should have a moral responsibility to protect our children.
Like the fact that this guy's like so religious about it, and it's like this obsession is just over the top. He has the same position as RFK. Yeah, he literally has the same position as RFK, the exact same. Yeah,
Against something that could potentially be life-threatening, particularly when it's.
Oh my gosh, that's a hot guy. And it's like, dude, you have the same position as RFK. Like, and he's all acting like he's all bent out of shape. Like, this guy is just. You can just tell he's creepy too. You can just tell he's a pervert.
Spreading across the United States the way it is.
You said there are people like you who can't speak freely. You can speak freely because you're no longer at the FDA.
Correct.
You're saying your former colleagues can't directly answer a question, they can't honestly answer a question and endorse a vaccine right now?
I think it's challenging in this environment for some of them, but you'd have to ask them directly.
Yeah. In your resignation letter, you wrote of the measles outbreak and what happens when confidence in science is undermined. You said it's clear truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. Did you ever speak to him about your concerns?
So just a matter of record, I never interacted with the secretary. I don't intend to engage on disputing any of that. Its administration can have me come and go. That's fine. The more important thing here is that we deal with the issue at hand, which is vaccine confidence is really important for this country, and it's been undermined over.
Well, having you come on, having this jackass come on and tell us the vaccines are safe, the vaccines are safe, the vaccine, that's not effective. That's not helping anybody.
And over again over the past years, and now we're seeing the result of this.
You are saying here that the man running HHS doesn't take in information, wishes subservient confirmation of misinformation and lies. There's presumed outcomes, is what you're saying.
I think that my words then spoke for itself. I don't need to belabor it here. Science is the pursuit of objective truth for the benefit of mankind. And those of us who believe in it, we take it very seriously. And it hurts us deeply when there are those who would undercut the name of science, undercut the very name of science.
Undercut the very name. This guy's speaking as if this is religious for him. This is a spiritual, religious thing for him. These vaccines and science are this guy's spiritual fulfillment and religion, which means you cannot trust him.
Because it's convenient for them to purvey lies. And that's just, it's not okay, because at the end of the day, I was so strong.
I pray to science. I worship science. And so that's why when RFK Jr. says he supports the measles vaccines, that this is just lies and how dare you attack science. Wait, what? He has the same position as you. Yeah, but science. I mean, this is just absurd. Who buys this shit?
Affected by what happened last week with the death of a second child, that I actually used profanity with a reporter while I was on the record without realizing it, which is something I've never done. I don't believe that we should be saying, well, these are people who believe that they shouldn't be vaccinated, because my experience, the Mennonite community, my experience is that if you meet people on their level, they generally will eventually come around.
Many parents probably know ASD diagnosis rates are on the increase in this country. The CDC says the current numbers are 1 in 36 American children. This is a very broad spectrum of neurodevelopmental disorders. There's no established cause. On Thursday, the HHS Secretary Kennedy said he's got hundreds of scientists from around the world working on it, and he promised this.
By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic, and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
That gives tremendous hope to a lot of people. Do you know anything about that ongoing research?
I know a minimal amount of effort that's being going on to try to relook at prior autism research, but I'm not aware of what is being discussed there. I cared for leukemia patients for a significant number of years. Giving people false hope.
Sure you did, bro. Sure you did.
Something you should never do. It is absolutely, you can be incredibly supportive of people, but giving them false hope is wrong. If you just ask me as a scientist, is it possible to get the answer that quickly? I don't see any possible way. And remember, you're talking to the person who came up with Operation Warp Speed for vaccines. Autism is an incredibly complicated issue. So we have the issue of diagnosis bias. We don't know how many of those cases are true.
I can't deal with this guy. What a dirtbag. What an absolute just dirt. What a just
I'm joined now by Secretary of Commerce Howard.
Absolute just dirt
This week
bag.
with George Stephanopoulos starts right now.
Changing course. People were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippee. President Trump hits pause on at least some of his tariffs after days of market turmoil, but he escalates the trade war with China. China was by far the biggest abuser in history, but somebody had to do it.
Either China comes to the table with Donald Trump or they don't. They can't afford to be without us.
The president now carving out exemptions on electronics. The partial reversals bringing a sigh of relief. So what will the 90-day pause mean for the American economy? Are Trump's tariffs constitutional? This morning, I'll ask Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. Senator Elizabeth Warren responds. And will he or won't he?
I have no desire to be a politician, but I've decided I'm no longer going to close that door.
Our exclusive with ESPN's Stephen A. Smith, the king of the hot take, takes on Trump and the Democrats and why he's thinking about running for president. Plus,
we're honored to have Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. She's really done an excellent job.
How did Gretchen Whitmer end up in the Oval Office while Trump signed retribution orders against his former aides? The roundtable takes on all the week's politics.
Retribution orders.
This week, here now, Jonathan Karl.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week. President Trump's trade war is still on, but it looks a whole lot different than it did just a few days ago. The biggest change coming in the dead of night on Friday. At 10:36 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol put out a notice saying that a wide range of electronics will now be exempt from Donald Trump's new tariffs. That means no new tariffs on smartphones or flat-screen TVs, no new tariffs on laptops and memory chips, no new tariffs on the machines used to create semiconductors. The move takes away, at least for now, most of the new tariffs on the largest single category of imports from China, as well as electronics made everywhere else in the world. Is this all more Trump flexibility? Is it all part of a multi-dimensional negotiating strategy? Or is it just more chaos? How long will these exemptions last? In a moment, I'll talk to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to try to find out what is going on and what will happen next. But first, here's a look at the extraordinary week of surprises, reversals, and market turmoil.
When he announced his tariffs last week, President Trump called it Liberation Day. The markets didn't see it that way.
Close to about 4,000 points lost in just 2 days. You can see there on the opening bell down 1,200 points here.
But Trump didn't seem to care, declaring late last week, "My policies will never change." Even as the markets continued to tank and his allies on Wall Street pleaded with him to at least take a breather and put his tariffs on hold, Trump stood firm.
Would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that.
He said he's not considering.
Yeah, that's hilarious, Altair. Well said, Altair. Gary-a-Trick, what up, Gary-a-Trick? What up, Gary-a-Trick? Welcome, welcome. Trump had to bend the knee to China? No, he didn't. China has no cards. China's economy sucks. The CCP is rotten from the inside, just like the Soviet Union was. Get real, bro.
During an extension or a delay.
There would be no negotiation.
They've ripped us off left and right. But now it's our turn to do the ripping.
It wasn't just stocks tanking, but bonds too, and the U.S. dollar. J.P. Morgan put the risk of recession at 60%, warning of higher inflation, others warning of economic meltdown. For a while at least, Trump seemed unfazed.
I know what the hell I'm doing. I know what I'm doing, and you know what I'm doing too. That's why you vote for me.
The next day, a stunning reversal. Trump announced he would pause the so-called reciprocal tariffs that had just gone into effect for 90 days. The move blindsided just about everybody, including his own top trade advisor, who was testifying before Congress when he saw the news.
Are you aware that the tariffs have been paused?
I am, yes.
When were you made aware of that?
Well, I understood the decision was made a few minutes ago.
It looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you and paused the tariffs, the taxes on the American people. There's no strategy. You just found out 3 seconds ago, sitting here, we saw you.
President Trump said the move was prompted by the market turndown.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
His reversal caused market whiplash, the Dow spiking 2,900 points, the S&P posting its biggest one-day gain since the 2008 financial crisis. But the rebound was short-lived. Even with the pause, 10% tariffs remain in effect globally, and a 145% tax on everything coming in from China, prompting China to impose a 125% tariff on American products, an all-out trade war between the world's largest economies.
It was a big mistake, this Chinese escalation.
Well, the White House says there are negotiations underway with more than 70 countries.
Complete trash. Let's see if we can make it through Meet the Press. The best and the brightest right here, Kristen Welker.
This Sunday, pressing pause. President Trump reverses some of his most punishing tariff plans for 90 days after growing uncertainty and days of market meltdowns.
You have to be able to show a little flexibility.
This is chaos. This is government by chaos.
I know what the hell I'm doing.
This was his strategy all along.
What happens next in this escalating trade war? My exclusive guest this morning, President Trump's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, Ray Dalio, founder and chief investment officer for the world's largest hedge fund, and Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Plus, deported by mistake after the Supreme Court orders the return of a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador.
He's not a Maryland man. Quit calling him a Maryland man.
Is the Trump administration now defying a judge's order? And Oval Office optics. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer finds herself in an uncomfortable spot when she visits the Trump White House. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell,
Democrat.
Jonathan Martin of Politico,
Democrat.
Republican strategist Matt Gorman,
Democrat.
and Kimberly Atkins Storrs, senior opinion writer for the Boston Globe.
Democrat.
Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
Democrat.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. As the president's trade war enters a new week, the uncertainty and disruption to the global economic order is growing. Just hours after President Trump's tariffs took effect this week, he made a stunning reversal and pressed pause for 90 days.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
After asking Americans to hang tough and be cool, President Trump made his about face in a social media post, and it came after claiming a pause would not happen.
Would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that.
Almost all foreign countries still face a 10% tariff. China's tariffs have now increased to 145%. But late Friday, President Trump decided to exclude electronic imports, including smartphones, laptops, flat screens, and computer chips from the new tariffs, adding to the confusion. More than 70% of all smartphones sold in the U.S. are made in China. It was a roller coaster week on Wall Street as the administration urged Americans to remain patient.
There'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful.
I know, Altair. I just noticed that. Like, they totally just lied. They literally said, President Trump said he would never, ever, ever do this. Look, he says he would never, ever do it. And then they show the clip. Would you ever do this? And he says, we're not looking at it right now. It's like, huh? That you just lied. You just proved yourself a liar.
We will end up in a place of great certainty over the next 90 days on tariffs.
The administration insists this was the plan all along, but the abrupt pause in those initial tariffs came after the Treasury Secretary and Commerce Secretary raised serious concerns over the bond market. President Trump also said he was watching Jamie Dimon, the leader of the country's largest bank, on television.
Do you personally expect a recession?
I am going to defer to my economists at this point, but I think probably that's a likely outcome.
Fears of a recession are driving consumer sentiment to plunge, with inflation worries rising. Calls from allies to reverse course had been growing in the days before President Trump's change in plans. Elon Musk publicly broke with Trump on the issue, calling for a zero tariff situation, attacking the White House's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, as a, quote, moron and dumber than a sack of bricks. The White House downplayed the public spat.
These are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue.
And joining me now is White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. Mr. Navarro, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Great to be with you. The digs here are pretty plush.
Well, we'll get to...
A lot of history there.
We'll get to your back and forth with Elon Musk in just a bit, but I want to start off on the policy, the important thing here. President Trump, as we just laid out, did hit the pause button on his tariffs. He lowered them to 10% for most countries. And just yesterday, the White House announced new exclusions for smartphones and other electronics. Mr. Navarro, how can consumers and businesses make decisions when it seems as though the president's trade policies are shifting at a moment's notice?
So this is unfolding exactly like we thought it would in a dominant scenario. What's going on here is we start with the observation. I don't think you would disagree with me at all. The world cheats us. They've been cheating us for decades. They cheat us with tariffs, higher tariffs. But more importantly, they cheat us with the so-called non-tariff barriers. It's the VAT taxes, the dumping, the currency manipulation, the technical barriers that keep our autos out of Japan, the agricultural barriers that keep our pork out of Australia or Europe. They're doing that to the tune of $1.2 trillion of wealth
a year that we transfer now abroad, and $18 trillion of wealth since we started running deficits. You know how much $18 trillion of America that could buy? So that's the problem we're grappling with. So we have a strategy here where the president says we're going to charge them what they charge us. And the analytical issue is it's easy to calculate the tariff differential, but the non-tariff barriers are so much higher. So that's what we set, knowing full well that a lot of countries would come right to us and want a bargain. We've got 90 deals in 90 days possibly pending here. And it was par for the course. Actually, it was a birdie for President Trump to do exactly what he did, which was pause for 90 days. And we're going to get this done for the American people.
I want to talk about the status of those potential pending deals. But first, look, you're talking about the fact that the White House has a strategy. The Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary, the President himself said there would not be exclusions. And yet, just yesterday, there were exclusions. So is there, in fact, a plan, or is the president making this up as he goes along?
So the policy is no exemptions, no exclusions. The policy is in effect. No, there were not exclusions. Yes. Let me explain.
Okay.
This is really good for the American people to understand. There's like different ways to go about getting fairness for the American people. We started with the fentanyl border tariffs. That's an IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And we had a crisis at the border. We continue to see people die. By the time this show's over, another couple of Americans will be dead from fentanyl in just this short period of time. We did that. So the IEEPA is also used for the trade deficit, but there's also a really important thing, Kristen, and this deals with the CHIPS issue you're talking about. That's what we call the Section 232 issue, which is when we have a flood of imports being dumped into certain key strategic sectors, steel, aluminum, chips, pharmaceuticals, as we learned during COVID, we have to take specific action. So what we're doing with chips, the problem, interestingly, for chips, because it's very complex stuff, is that we don't buy a lot of chips like in bags, we buy them in products. So what Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick is going to do, is doing it as we speak, is an investigation of the chip supply chain. The goal is stability and resilience. And you will see actions taken based on those investigations on copper. We already have steel and aluminum. We already have autos. There will be pharmaceuticals. And there will be chips. And the important thing is, there's three kinds. There's the high-end chips, which is the AI future. Okay, we've got to get control of that. And then there's everything else that fuels our autos and on down.
Fair enough. I hear what you're saying on investigation, but there is currently an exclusion for some of those
chips. Winter Suns, what up, Winter?
Potatoes, potatoes.
No, it's not.
What it is.
The White House called it an exclusion.
Well, but let's say, let's just. Here's, I think, another thing that's really important. When people talk about the chaos or lack of strategy, whatever, you just go back to day one. I was there when the president signed it. It was the second to last order he signed. It was in the Oval that night. And it was the America First trade policy, which laid out every single thing we're doing. And it would be remiss for anybody in the media not to review that carefully and see that there's rhyme to our reason and rhythm to what we're doing.
Yeah, but now the administration is actually on its website saying that they're offering refunds for some of these products. But let's talk about day one, okay? Because on the campaign trail, President Trump promised to bring down prices on day one. Now he's telling Americans there's going to be a transition cost. I don't have to tell you this. People are worried about everything from their retirement savings to the prices they're going to pay at the grocery store, whether shelves.
No, you idiot. The transition cost is the fact that the market is down right now. Why does nobody in talking about this ever bring up the fact that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street control massive amounts of the market and can control and move the markets, and all three of those massive asset managers hate Trump? Why does nobody ever bring that up?
Will be stocked. I think the big question is, how long will Americans have to wait? How long will this transition of uncertainty last?
Well, let's talk about both.
Abdi, what's up, Abdi?
Because there was some really big news this last week. And I'm going to answer your question. Trust me on that. So We had really good news on the inflation front. Both the producer price index, which is wholesale prices, consumer price index, had the lowest print since fall of 2023. Really good news, and nobody expected that. And the reason why that kind of thing's happening is because the Trump policies on other fronts, oil's down to $61 a barrel. Okay, so, but the other thing, and this is like, should have been in that little package you had at the beginning, the Congress passed the resolution, the budget resolution, which lays the groundwork for having the biggest, broadest tax cut in American history before August. Now, what does that mean? Yeah. What does it mean for both recession and inflation? It means that we're going to have a debt-neutral tax cut financed by tariff revenues that's going to stimulate growth. It could be worth as much of 1.5 points in terms of GDP growth. At the same time, it's deflationary, not inflationary. It's unlike the Biden fiscal measures, which were just pure debt-driven. So there's really good news here. And I predicted 50,000 on the Dow. I predicted a broad-based S&P rally. I don't know if you know this, Kristen, but it was 7 AI stocks that pulled up the S&P 500 during the Biden years. That's not growth.
And yet, I mean, Mr. Navarro, look, after the president's policies were announced, we did see the markets drop. The bond market was spooked. Consumer confidence has plummeted, and inflation fears are at the highest level since 1981. Let me just ask you.
But we did have the greatest rally in stock market history for many, many decades this last week.
But they're down from when the president announced his policies overall. Let me ask you, so that we can get this information to folks. Give me the top line number. How many countries is the administration currently negotiating with to get a trade deal?
Well, let me see how many I can do. And remember, Kristen, we talked offline about this. We started doing this long before we announced the pause in the reciprocal tariffs in anticipation of this. So we've got the UK, we've got the EU, we've got India, we've got Japan, we've got North Korea, we've got Indonesia, we've got Israel, and they're just lining up outside the door of Jamieson Greer. The trade rep, Howard Lutnick, is very much a part of that. South Korea.
South Korea. Okay, yes. Okay, I just want to make sure there.
The only thing I can say about North Korea is it's quiet. Rocket Man's quiet again. We're getting. By the way, this is really important for peace in our time, because we had prosperity and peace. President is working hard with people like Steve Witkoff on peace, Gaza, in Ukraine. With Iran,
right, Panzer. Exactly.
Action going on there. Do you know what that will mean for oil prices and for everything else?
Very quickly, are you talking to China? Is the administration talking to China right now?
We have opened up our invitation to them. Look, the president has a really good relationship.
But no talks right now?
The president has a very good relationship with President Xi. And we're going through a period where we hope that we'll be able to get to the other side of that. But here, let me say this about China. I think this is really important. China has killed over 1 million people with their fentanyl. We lost around 60,000 people in the Vietnam War. China has killed over 1 million people. China has taken over 60,000 of our factories, over 5 million manufacturing jobs. As we speak, every American is subject to hacking by the Chinese trying to get their money or their data. And the conflict we're having with them cannot be understated. And we have to be clear-eyed about that. Having said that, it would be nice if China did what they should do, which is move to a more domestic consumption-driven economy and stop being the predator of the world.
A couple more questions for you. We're almost out of time. I want to let you respond to this back and forth with Elon Musk. Elon Musk was publicly advocating for a zero-tariff trade deal. That goes against what you believe in, what President Trump believes in, presumably. But did Elon Musk win here, given these pauses and exclusions?
So first of all, Elon and I are great. It's not an issue.
Even though he called you a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks?
I've been called worse. Everything's fine with Elon. And look, Elon's doing a very good job with his team with waste, fraud, and abuse. That's a tremendous contribution to America. And no man doing that kind of thing should be subject to having his cars firebombed by crazies. I mean, that is like
broad
beyond a pale.
agreement there.
So
Broad
nobody
agreement
should
there.
have to come into this government and have that happen or have to go to jail like I did.
Is what Elon's saying, is he disagreeing with the president's policies, Mr. Navarro?
So let's talk about the zero tariff issue, okay? Because this is really kind of interesting. We had Vietnam come to us first, and then the EU.
There it is again. Okay, so let's talk about this zero. This is very interesting. Totally wasted time.
Zero tariffs get the American people virtually nowhere, particularly with a country like Vietnam, which sells us $15 for every $1 we sell. It doesn't work. The big problem we have are the non-tariff barriers, the currency manipulation, the dumping, the VAT taxes, all of that stuff that we have no defense against other than tariffs right now.
Very quickly, because we're out of time.
Sure.
To
Hey, I'll stay as long as you want.
reports that you've been sidelined.
I'll take Cory Booker's time.
To the reports that you've been sidelined, Mr. Navarro.
Yeah.
Is that true? Have you
So
been sidelined?
this is like the
Just
world.
yes or no, because we're out of time.
I'm here.
Okay, so is that
I'm
a no?
here. I'm here on Meet the Press.
All right.
I think you like to think this is the top show on Sunday.
I like to think so.
I guess I'm here.
I like to think so,
Kristen,
Mr.
anytime
Navarro.
I'll come
Thank
back,
you.
okay?
Appreciate it very
I'll
much.
toast
We
to
hope you do.
Tim Russell,
You have
and
that invitation.
the second
Thank you.
female
Thank you for being
host
here.
in the history of the program.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate that. When we come back, Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest
I don't know why Peter Navarro is such kind of like a weirdo, but okay.
hedge fund, joins me next.
That's creepy.
Welcome back, and joining me now is Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. He is also the author of the new book, How Countries Go Broke. It's out in June. Mr. Dalio, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be here. Just call me Ray.
Okay, well, Ray, I'll take you up on that. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your perspective. As I just said, you did found the world's largest hedge fund. You have been in this field for more than 50 years. It's worth pointing out to our viewers, I think it's important to note you consider yourself to be apolitical, and you say that the tariff problem is a symptom of a much greater problem. What do you mean by that?
There's a financial problem. There's an imbalance problem. There are basically 5 big forces through history that drive everything. First, there's the money, credit, debt, economic cycle in which there's a building up of debt in a cyclical way that becomes too large, and we're going to have problems. We're going to have a government debt problem. Maybe we can get into this. The second big force through time is the internal conflict force, the left and the right, differences in wealth and values causing a conflict that we're seeing it changing our political order. So the first is changing our monetary order. The second is changing our political order internally. And then the third is the great world order, how countries deal with each other. When there's a rising power, challenging an existing power. And now we are going from multilateralism, which is largely an American world order type of thing, to a unilateral world order in which there's great conflict. And the other 2 factors all through history have been acts of nature, droughts, floods, and pandemics. And number 4 is technology changing. And how they are coming together are the main forces behind this. For example, there can't be imbalances anymore in that environment.
Do you think that President Trump's tariffs
Pretty good
are
point.
exacerbating
Pretty good point right there.
what you are
Sparkle,
describing,
what's up?
this complicated mix of challenges that the world is facing?
I think it's just a function of how well they're handled. You know, it's a reality that it's a desire to bring in tax revenue from that. It's a reality that we would like to build manufacturing and jobs here. This is a reality. That's how that's done, whether that's done in a practical way, whether that's done in a stable way, whether that's done with quality negotiations in which that's a mutual problem, or whether that's done in a chaotic and disruptive way that produces great conflict, makes all the difference in the world.
Based on what you're seeing right now, do you think that these tariffs are being carried out in a practical way or a chaotic way?
I think we'll see. So far, very disruptive. So far, very disruptive, right? And so we don't know what the numbers are. But that could be part of a process, right? It depends where we are at the end of the 90 days. Because what was put there is like throwing rocks into the production system. And those impacts would be enormous in terms of the efficiency of the whole world, great cost.
I want to ask you about something that's on a lot of people's minds, your predictions for the future. And I want to start with the R word. I know you think this is just a piece of it. Of course, I'm talking about a recession. Do you think it is likely that the United States will dip into a recession because of President Trump's tariffs?
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well. Let's take the debt situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, very quickly, because I want to be very specific about what you mean. You're saying worse than recession. You're saying this is reminiscent of the 1930s. We should tell our viewers you correctly predicted the 2008 financial crisis. What is your prediction for where the country is headed right now?
Right now, we're at a...
Oh, wow. Trump just tweeted something 10 minutes ago. Nobody is getting off the hook for the unfair trade balances and non-monetary tariff barriers that other countries have used against us, especially not China, which by far treats us the worst. There was no tariff exception announced on Friday. These products are subject to the existing 20% fentanyl tariffs, and they are just moving to a different tariff bucket. The fake news knows this but refuses to report it. We are taking a look at semiconductors and the whole electronic supply chain in the upcoming national security tariff investigations. What has been exposed is that we need to make products in the United States and that we will not be held hostage by other countries, especially hostile trading nations like China, which will do everything within its power to disrespect the American people. We also cannot allow them to continue to abuse us on trade like they have for decades. Those days are over. The golden age of America, which includes the upcoming tax and regulation cuts, a substantial amount of which was just approved by the House and the Senate, will mean more money and more better-paying jobs, making products in our nation and treating other countries, in particular China, the same way they've treated us. The bottom line is our country will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. We will make America great again.
Juncture. Let's take the budget.
A quick bathroom break.
If the budget deficit can be reduced to 3% of GDP, it will be about 7% if things are not changed. If it could be reduced to about 3% of GDP, and these trade deficits and so on are managed in the right way, this could all be managed very well. I believe that members of Congress should take the pledge, what I call the 3% pledge, that in one way or another, that they will get that budget deficit down to that number. If they don't, we're going to have a supply-demand problem for debt at the same time as we have these other problems. And the results of that will be worse than a normal recession.
So, and just to follow up on that point, worse than a recession, you're talking about the 1930s. What specifically are you warning of? Are you saying that it could be as bad as a depression? What's your biggest fear?
The value of money. What is a storehold of wealth? That is a bond. In other words, one man's debt is another man's assets, bondholders. And so we're going to be in a situation where if that storehold of wealth is in jeopardy, because there's too much supply and demand and so on, and we have a monetary inflation, we will have great disruptions. And that could be like the breakdown of the monetary system in 71. It could be like 2008. It's going to be very severe. I think it could be more severe than those if these other matters simultaneously occur. Imagine if we have a downturn politically and an international conflict.
What's worst case scenario that you're warning of? To be very specific, to be very
specific, the value of money, internal conflict, that is not the normal democracy as we know it, and international conflict in a way that is highly disruptive to the world economy and could even be a military conflict, just as these breakdowns have occurred before. You know, we have a new order that began in 1945, a new monetary order and a new geopolitical order. And these go in cycles that can be measured. And I worry about the breakdown of that kind of an order, particularly since it doesn't need to happen, because there are certain things that could be done in which this is better, a better restructuring of these debts and actions taken.
So that takes me to my next question. You have this book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle. What is the solution here?
Well, there are a series of solutions, but let's take the most important.
And we have 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. 3% of GDP, bring that deficit down. It can be done in a bipartisan way, the way it was done between 1991 and 98. I explained how that could be done, doing things together for the greater good. And then internationally on all of these issues, to use American strength, but to negotiate well, to lay out ways in which bad conflict and inefficient policies don't create great disruptions, but get us through this in an orderly way.
All right, Ray Dalio, thank you so much. Your book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. When we come back, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey joins me next. Welcome back. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator Booker, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's dive right in. Let's start with the tariffs. You have actually long emphasized the need for fair trade deals to protect American workers, to prevent jobs from going overseas. If President Trump's tariffs do in fact lead to better trade deals in the long run, even if there is some short-term economic pain, would that justify President Trump's tariffs?
We're not seeing any likelihood of that. I mean, right away off the bat, we're seeing him break his promise. He said on day one he would lower prices. This is going to increase the average family in America's prices from $4,000 to $5,000 of more expenses to the American family. We're seeing real decisions being made, from Stellantis to Cleveland Cliffs, a steel manufacturer, laying off thousands of people. And in addition to that, President Trump now has a crisis in credibility. We're hearing from around the world, people just don't know if they can trust him. His sense of honor and decency actually has real consequences globally, and is forcing countries who've made deals with him in the past, like Canada and Mexico, which then he upends, really forcing countries to think about other options. And it is a real national security issue when you see Japan and South Korea, two key allies, meeting with China to talk to them about how to deal with what they perceive as a threat of a chaotic and unpredictable president to the world and global economy.
Well, let me talk about how some of your Democratic colleagues are responding.
Too rich to hear Democrats pretend like they care about this kind of stuff, like they care about costs and inflation and stuff. Oh, it's just too much to handle. This guy's an absolute dirtbag. This guy's the reason that inflation spiked.
Responding to this moment, a few have actually stopped short of
condemning
President Trump's tariffs outright, really trying to walk a fine line. Take a look.
Tariffs are a powerful tool. They can be used strategically or they can be misused.
Tariffs are a very important part, a tool in our economic toolbox, but they have to be used in a way that is targeted.
I understand the motivation behind the tariffs. And I can tell you, here's where President Trump and I do agree. We do need to make more stuff in America.
Now, as you know, even former President Biden kept some of President Trump's tariffs in place from the first term. Are those Democrats taking the right approach, Senator?
Listen, I just want to, for myself, tell you a full-throated, unequivocal condemnation of the Trump tariffs. There's no wisdom in this, the chaotic way he's doing it, the challenges he's putting on American families in terms of costs, rising costs and jobs. This has no strategy. It has no sense. He's being attacked by people on the left and the right, and from the markets, devastating people's retirement security, to the global chaos right now and unpredictability. There's no equivocation here. His tariff strategy is wrong. The way he's putting it out there, no thoughtfulness, no slow increase of tariffs, it is all just wrong. It should be condemned, and it should be stopped the way it's happening right now because it's hurting American people.
It's looking like they might collapse first,
Your Democratic colleagues are actually calling for an investigation into whether or not there was insider trading. The president saying it's a good time to buy, and then, of course, hitting the pause button on some of those tariffs. Do you believe that Democrats have any real evidence that anyone in the administration profited off of the president's policies and announcements, or is this just a fishing expedition?
You know, here's the problem with Donald Trump and congressional Republicans is our whole system was designed to have checks and balances. Now, Trump has designed an administration like none we've ever seen before. He is attacking the very agencies that are supposed to have independent oversight of these kind of actions. So we see him
West dude. I've been seeing videos that are out of China where it's all of these Chinese businesses that are like, all of my orders are canceled. I'm a Chinese business. I manufacture jeans. All of my jean orders are canceled. The Chinese businesses are drying up. The Chinese businesses are going bankrupt because their orders are being canceled.
Hiring people based upon their loyalty, not based upon their expertise. The real group that should be holding investigations and accountability and even just oversight is Congress.
But is there any evidence, Senator? Do you think there's any evidence that anyone profited off of these tariffs?
There is enough of an offense here. There's enough smoke here that should demand congressional hearings. We are a separate and equal branch of government. The Constitution lays out very clearly that Congress is not supposed to be spineless and submissive. It is supposed to hold up oversight over the president. These are real, legitimate, justifiable questions, and not to have hearings, not to do any kind of oversight undermines the faith we have in our government, undermines the trust we need in our nation.
This guy is just such a phony.
And so from the signal gate all the way to this kind of symbols or signs of corruption, Congress should be doing its job.
Senator, a couple more to get to here, and we're almost out of time. The Supreme Court, as you know, ordered the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate and effectuate the return of a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador. There's been a big back and forth between the administration and the courts over this. Overnight, President Trump putting out a post saying that ultimately this is the decision of the El Salvadoran president who's going to be visiting the White House on Monday. Do you think the Trump administration is defying a court order?
It certainly appears that they are, and they're trying to play too cute with parsing words. The court has ordered the return of this person and that the Trump administration should do it. They're paying an authoritarian leader in El Salvador to hold people in the worst imaginable types of prisons that he has sent there without any due process. And this isn't just about Mr. Garcia. This is about every American understanding that this president is making an assault on the due process rights that are afforded to people in our country. Everybody from Anton Scalia to other conservative think tanks have said very clearly, you cannot disappear people off American streets. We are a nation of rules, and due process is clearly one of them. And to erode the due process rights of anyone is a threat to the due process rights of everyone. This is a democratic slippage, and we all should be speaking out against it.
Senator, let's talk about the future of the party. Apparently, Vice President Harris is still weighing a presidential run in 2028. Do you think Vice President Harris should run again?
You know, I know Vice President Harris. I don't think she's concerning herself with 2028. I think she's concerning herself, like most Americans right now, is why do I have a president that's attacking due process?
But do you think she should run again? Do you want to see her run again, Senator? You supported her. Do you want to see her run again?
I am literally getting thousands
Democratic
and thousands
slippage.
of phone calls, people stopping me on the streets in crisis right now. They're losing
Democratic
jobs. They're seeing
slippage.
their costs go up. They're worried about their housing. Honestly, I don't care about 2028. I care about stopping the hurting of American people right now. And if Democrats in general, we should not be concerned about the party's future. We should be concerned about people's present, and that's where I'm focused.
30 seconds left. Very quickly, what should the message from Democrats be right now, Senator?
We should be focusing on the American people. This is not about party. It's not about left or right. It's about right or wrong. We are in a moral moment right now in our country with attacks on Medicaid.
This is a moral moment. This is a moral moment, guys.
Medicaid, in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest in our country. This is not who we are. We need to fight to defend American jobs, American costs and economic security, American health care. We are in a real crisis with the bill that the Republicans are pushing and the assaults on the integrity of this country and the constitutional principles. It's time to stand up and fight back against what's happening. And this is not just for Democrats, it's for Republicans in Congress that whisper to me privately their concerns about what the president's doing. This is a moral moment. It's time for more and more people to stand up.
Senator, yes or no? Are you considering a run in 2028?
I'm focused on today and my reelection in 26. I've already announced to the people of New Jersey, I'm hoping they'll allow me to be their senator for another 6 years. Okay. And let's be clear, I'm proud of the work that we've done over the last 6 years. There's been no senator that has had a better record of bringing resources back to the state of New Jersey. So I'm focused on the now, working to defend folks.
Sure
and
you are, bro.
Willing,
sure you are, bro.
Reelected in 2026.
All right. I don't hear you ruling it out. Senator Booker, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you'll come back soon with that answer. When we come back, History on Ice. Our Meet the Press Minute is next. Welcome back. The Stanley Cup playoffs kick off on Saturday. And this year, Washington Capitals star Alex Ovechkin wraps the season as the new top goal scorer in NHL history, surpassing Wayne Gretzky's record of 894 goals. The Stanley Cup itself was a guest on Meet the Press in 1998 when our own Tim Russert introduced the iconic trophy on the broadcast with a little help from a very special person.
This is it. The Stanley Cup, 105 years old. This is the real thing. The most recognizable trophy in all professional sports. It weighs 35 pounds. It's about 3 feet tall. And right here is where the next Stanley Cup champion's name will go. Right here. They engrave all the players, the coaches, the managers, all the helpers. My beloved Buffalo Sabres couldn't make it. So now this cup is in Washington. And we believe it's going to stay in Washington. Abe Pollin, the owner of the Capitals, built the MCI Arena. His chance to win the Stanley Cup, he certainly deserves it. I've been going around talking to viewers all across the country. Here's one here. Here's an objective viewer. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup?
Capitals, no brainer.
No brainer. Now, can you put this cup over your head?
No.
Why?
Because I haven't won it.
That's right. Only those who win the cup can put it over their head, but you can, sir, give it a hug. Thank you, my assistant, Mr. Luke Russert.
What a great moment on the show. When we come back, what happens next in President Trump's trade war? The panel is next.
Yeah, you did, West Dude. Yep. Here we go with the biggest joke panel of all time.
Welcome back. The panel is here. Kelly O'Donnell, senior White House correspondent for NBC News. Jonathan Martin, politics bureau chief and senior political columnist for Politico. Kimberly Atkins-Storr, senior opinion writer for the Boston Globe, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Thanks to all of you for being here after a very busy week. Kelly O'Donnell, let's start with you. I think one of the words of this week is uncertainty. There's uncertainty about what's going to happen next in the president's trade war. There's uncertainty about how many countries they're talking to. You heard me try to get that out of Peter Navarro. He did name some countries. Still not clear exactly how many they're negotiating with.
John, what's
well,
up?
The White House wants it to be an expansive list of nearly the whole globe. What I have been told in the last 24 hours is that 20 countries have provided written proposals to the administration saying this is what we would be willing to offer, this is what we would like to achieve. So that certainly moves it forward in terms of a willingness to negotiate. But so much of what we've seen here is everything's baked into the plan, and yet the president seems to be harnessing something new, which is the lightning bolt strategy. A boom, let me just hit the whole system with another shock. And we've seen that. We've seen that with how he arrived at the pause to begin with, after saying there wouldn't be a pause, getting comfortable with a pause. And now going forward, part of what we're hearing is some things are being carved out for national security reasons. There are consumer products that may be hit with tariffs. In the 90-day period, when that elapses, I've been told that those countries that didn't take this seriously will also feel the pain of this, because what they're saying is that the president wants people to take this seriously. Not only tariffs, but the whole restructuring approach of taxes, regulation, cutting government costs, as reordering the economic structure of the U.S. and, by extension, the globe.
Yeah, that's a lot of new information. Jonathan, when you hear that, when Republicans on the Hill hear that, they may be breathing a tiny sigh of relief, because there's been a fair amount of consternation on the Hill publicly. Few Republicans speaking out about these tariffs, but we know that they've been picking up the phones, calling the White House, saying we're concerned.
Yeah, because it's still a free trade party, especially in the Senate. I'm sure that is the plan today, but who knows what the plan is going to be tomorrow. The great American philosopher Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. And that's what happened this week. The global economy slugged us in the face, and Trump responded. It was a reminder of that great George W. Bush line. He said, I'm the decider. In fact, the bond market is the decider when it comes to politics. And that's what I think forced Trump's hand. The value of the dollar is plummeting, the bond market flashing red, and Trump responded to that. That is the ultimate veto. It's not the Congress, it's not the courts, it's the markets, and that's what forced Trump's hand this week.
Yeah, and boy, did the markets have a rocky ride this week, last week, Matt Gorman, and it comes as what I was discussing with Peter.
It really is, Guess. It really is, Guess.
On a promise to bring down prices.
It's horrible,
now,
isn't it? I can't believe I do this.
Transition.
Can you believe I still do this?
How can
you guys believe I put myself through these Sunday shows for so you guys can get the little entertainment you get when you see me lose my shit over this insanity?
Concerning is that based on your conversations to Republicans?
You know, and the market instability obscured some positive news. We have the lowest inflation in 4 years, so there's a story to tell
right,
there.
West, dude.
But
Yep.
I think Republicans are breathing a huge sigh of relief, because what they're seeing now is the tariffs as a negotiating strategy rather than some sort of new world order, and they feel far more comfortable defending that and having input on that. And I think having Bessent out front as the face of this in many respects also reassures them too. And looking forward, the party and the White House far more comfortable taking on China than broadly the world as a whole.
Yeah, well, and of course, the Fed chair did say he believes these tariffs could ultimately raise inflation. Kimberly, do you think Democrats, they have an opening here, but are they using it effectively?
I wish more Democrats in a united way would speak the way that Senator Booker did. You have a lot of Democrats, and I understand the desire to talk about policy and to talk about strategy. None of that is happening here. We are seeing just during the course of this show, things are changing minute by minute as to what is going on. This isn't a strategy, and it is so dangerous. I mean, I believe Ray Diallo when he says that
they really do. They really need a Scott Jennings on Meet the Press. This like fully Democrat roundtable is the biggest joke every week.
could be heading toward a depression. And I know Democrats get a lot of heat from Republicans about being too alarmist and talk about democracy being in peril too much. If we are in a position like we were in the 1930s, do you think talking about that too much is a problem? A collapsed economy is an open door to autocracy, and that is what Democrats should be shouting from the mountaintops.
Yeah, he said it could be worse than a recession. Jonathan, there was this extraordinary, speaking of the Democrats, moment when Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan came to Washington, delivered a speech about tariffs, said she wished there could be a more careful approach, then went to the White House to meet with President Trump. Her team says she was surprised when she was kind of ushered into the Oval Office while he was signing EOs. And this happened. She literally, for a moment, covered her face. It's an extraordinary, striking moment that speaks to how complicated it is for Democrats right now to figure out they want to energize their base, but also reach out to independents, particularly those who are potentially eyeing a run in 2028.
And in her case, trying to run a state for 2 more years that voted for Trump. But look, that picture is instantly iconic. This is Dukakis in the tank for the 21st century. The difference being Dukakis could blame his staff. She has nobody to blame but herself. And I think it was maladroit on 2 levels. First of all, the macro politics of it. Her assumption to...
yeah, she literally, if she wanted to meet with Trump and be there with Trump, like, she should have embraced it. Like, being there and then putting up the thing, like, looks so bad.
Give the speech she gave talking about working with Trump and then to go to the White House. Her party right now views Trump as akin to Erdogan or Orban, foreign autocrats. You don't cut deals with somebody who's trying to consolidate power and erode American institutions. That, number one, is her, I thought, faulty assumption. Then there's the micro. Why on earth is she in the White House at all and let herself be brought into the Oval Office? That's not her staff. That's her own instincts and her own politics culminating in holding up that file folder. You just don't do that. It's an error for the ages.
Well, and Kelly, her team and the governor says, look, I've got to reach across the aisle. I've got to work with President Trump if I want to get things done for the state of Michigan. She was there asking for things for Michigan. But we're seeing Democrats, and this kind of speaks to Kimberly's point, with a range of different responses. Compare what Governor Whitmer is doing to what we heard from Senator Booker to what we're hearing from other governors, Governor Pritzker, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, what you're seeing out on the trail with AOC and Bernie Sanders, who are really taking it to President Trump.
I've been checking in with a number of Democrats, including those supportive of Governor Whitmer, and what you hear is that nuance is tough, and they're trying to make a nuanced argument in the governing piece. The politics is more broad. They don't want to pull away from tariffs too much. They hear, especially in a purple state like Governor Whitmer's, that voters want the executive, whether it's the governor and the president, to work together, want less division. Well, doing that came at a terrible political cost for her. They say she's willing to withstand some embarrassment because of that. But as you pointed out, she had very specific asks for Michigan that were on the agenda. More broadly, if you're a blue state governor, if you're Governor Pritzker or others, the fight version on the Democrat side is coming to the fore. But that is difficult. They want to talk about the economy. They also want to talk about democracy and the courts. But I've been told saying that alleging that President Trump is corrupt is an easier argument than to try to explain the courts, which are so complex. So when you see the complex issues they're dealing with, of course, the economy is number one, but they also have to govern and withstand the politics that are changing moment by moment. So is there concern among Democrats about how to message it? Yes, there is.
Kimberly, do they have to get on the same page? Does that matter? Is it okay to have these disparate responses?
Look, I think the point is well taken that Governor Whitmer is a governor of a manufacturing state, a border state, international border state. Her posture is different. In Washington, there's no excuse for that. The Democrats in Washington have to do what they can to be a check on the presidency.
All right, we're an hour and 45 minutes away from the futures market, guys. An hour and 45 minutes away from futures.
Including reminding folks that constitutionally
Totally
the
guess.
power of levying tariffs is with Congress. We don't even know that, and I suspect that he is not acting within his constitutional authority to even levy these tariffs in such a unilateral way. There's so much water.
Shut up, lady. Shut up. Like Mark Levin. Oh my gosh, you guys, holy cow. I cannot believe we made it through the entire freaking Sunday shows, Let's raid Dave. Let's raid this. Yo, you guys, let's raid this small little streamer, guys. Can everybody go he's got 2 viewers right now, guys. He's got 2 viewers. He's an Armory Forger streamer. His name is Dave the King Killer. 1221. Go tell him hi from Lecture Fan. Please tell him hi from Lecture Fan. Please help me raid my boy. Thank you, guys.